Good evening and welcome to the April edition of Democracy is Not a Spectator Sport, a 1-hour monthly production of the League of Women Voters of Southeastern Connecticut. I'm Susan Dombrowski, resident of the town of Franklin, where I'm privileged to serve my community on the Board of Finance and also the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm also a member of the League of Women Voters. We're here tonight to talk about political parties in the 21st century, specifically the two-party system in Connecticut, our small towns and big cities where we the people really can get involved and make a difference, and in Washington, D.C., where I'm not really sure what goes. With us tonight is Mr. Ray Hackett, editorial page editor of the Norwich Bulletin, Melissa Schlag, first Selectman, Haddam, Connecticut, and Dr. Richard Cole, political science professor at the University of Connecticut. Republicans, Democrats, for many, it's the us versus them label that we put on ourselves, each other, our communities, our elected officials, our successes, and our problems. As part of learning about where we've come from and where we're going, we'll hear from a panel of local experienced professionals who care just about this issue as the League of Women Voters does. So to start, Ray Hackett, a journalist for 40 years, the first 10 years in radio before switching to newspapers. He's spent the last 27 years with the Norwich Bulletin and currently serves as the editorial page editor and political columnist. He will be retiring later this month, and we wish him well. Ray's work has been recognized by the New England Newspaper Association, the New England Associated Press Executives Association, Connecticut Society of Professional Journalists, and he's a 3-time winner of the Gatehouse Media Editorial Writer of the Year Award. Mr. Hackett is a veteran and served 2 tours in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War and was awarded a Bronze Star. He attended Rhode Island College upon his discharge and in 1989 was awarded a Knight Fellowship at the University of Maryland. Melissa Schlag is the first selectman in the town of Haddam and has been involved in politics since 2007. As a lifelong resident of Connecticut, Schlag grew up in Ellington, received a bachelor's degree from UCONN Stores. She got her start in politics in 2007 by helping to create a Better Haddam, a local third party to help a friend run for first selectman. At the time, many Haddam residents were disenfranchised by the 2 major parties in town. In 2007, their selectman candidate came in second in a 3-way race and came within 50 votes of winning in 2009. From this experience, Schlag realized how broken her local political system was and became actively involved as an organizer for change. In 2013, she was asked to run for first selectman of Haddam by the town Democrats against a popular 2-term Republican incumbent and went on to win that election. Melissa Schlag looks to open up the political field for third-party candidates to bring fresh and courageous perspectives to our local, national, and state governments. And third with us tonight is Dr. Richard Cole. Dr. Cole teaches political science at the University of Connecticut, Avery Point Branch. He is a retired Coast Guard officer who holds a Juris Doctorate from the University of Virginia Law School and a PhD from UCONN. His specialties include the U.S. Supreme Court and constitutional law. So welcome, all of you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
I have some questions that I think will help our viewers to understand the issues at hand. Firstly, why do we need political parties, any or all, in the 21st century? We all know they got started as an origin to have foot soldiers on the ground for generating and spreading ideas, and for the candidates having a label, typically being Democratic or Republican. Why do we need them? Right.
Well, to suggest that we don't need them would be suggest that they have no purpose, and I think they do serve a purpose. They do help with the organization. The real reasons that political parties got started exist as much today as they did back then. You need to have that organization, and particularly, again, with the country spread out as much as it is, I'll even take it this farther here. Mm-hmm. One of the best parts of politics, at least I think anyway, is when you get into the retail politics of New Hampshire and Iowa, where candidates have to go on out and actually meet people face to face. I've always said one of the great joys that I've experienced was in New Hampshire watching some of the most powerful people in the world sitting on a metal folding chair in a church basement trying to convince 3 farmers that they should be president of the United States. That's what political parties should be all about. I think where political parties get the bad reputation is somewhere along the lines they've lost sight of the fact that they don't own the election, we let them borrow it. And until we get back to a point where the political parties understand that this is cooperative, then you're always going to have that feeling. And I'll talk about some other things in regards to that, a little bit later. But political parties do serve a purpose, and I think Melissa can speak very much to that, because it's almost impossible these days to run without a party association, because you don't have the ground troops, you don't have the organization, and you certainly don't have the finances to get your name and your message out.
We are definitely going to talk about finances tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. Melissa, what say you?
Well, when you initially asked the question, I thought, well, we don't need political parties. We didn't start our country that way, and Ray a little bit changed my mind. But the problem is, because we have the 2-party system, it's so closed to any other party. To get in there, as when I ran for the Senate seat as a Green Party candidate, it was almost impossible at every turn to even enter into the political dialogue in the area. And Ray brought up a good point. Political parties do offer an opportunity for the candidates to speak to people in an organized way. The problem is the D's and the R's as a whole, as a rule, they've become lazy, and they think that they already own all of those votes and they don't have to do the work. As a third-party candidate, I needed to go out and collect signatures in order to even qualify for public financing, which we'll talk about later. That experience was probably one of the most amazing parts of that of my campaign, because you get to meet all of your voters, your constituents, and that's something that the Democrats and Republicans have missed out on for centuries. And I really think that we need to open up the system to more parties in order to condense everybody's ideas into, instead of just this blanket D and R. It's one size fits most right now, and I think we need to change that.
Dick, I'm going to ask you a question. Our 2 panelists have mentioned they've used the same word, that both of the big parties feel like they're owed the election, that it's already theirs and it's just a fight between the 2. What does that mean to the average voter?
Well, it's certainly going to focus their attention on those same 2 parties, and they may feel like there's no other option available, and that's too bad, because as you indicated, there are a lot of options available.
Do you think that affects voter turnout when people think they only have 2 choices?
Yes, I definitely do. I definitely do. I think one of the party's important roles right now is to explain their platforms and what they stand for, so that people can measure their own views against what the parties are espousing, so they can go to one or the other and learn where they should be. So I think that's an important function for parties today, to state their platforms clearly, so that people can figure them out and identify with them.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, and this goes on to what you just said. With the growth of technology, which give candidates the abilities to raise money, get their messages out, communicate to supporters, and woo the public, and lambast the opposition, do we still need the parties? Or is social media going to change everything?
I think we still do. I think an important function that they perform is to recruit people into politics, and to sort out people from their experiences, maybe at a lower level, if they're suitable for higher office and that sort of thing. And I don't think the average citizen has the wherewithal to do that. So I think they can perform a filtering process and sorting out people that would be good candidates for the future for one party or the other.
I think Dick might disagree with me. If you don't mind, I'll just jump in on that. I think social media is preaching to the choir. I honestly and truly think that the voter wants to have a clearer picture of who this candidate is and what they're all about. So the political party serves a purpose in that sense, but only if there is that third party, the journalist, the debate, the League of Women Voters, the town committee. I used to bring my daughter out on campaign trails with me. It was a great joy one day when I brought her to a Democratic town committee meeting in East Lyme, where Chris Dodd was sitting there trying to convince people to endorse him for re-election. She knew who Chris Dodd was because he's on television all the time. But there he was talking to people who are farmers and truck drivers and et cetera. That's democracy. And I think the political parties don't do enough. Again, I love retail politics, and I think if the parties put a little bit more emphasis into that, that they would do better.
Let's pause for just a second. Now, that's the second time you've mentioned that retail politics. What exactly does that mean?
That means I have to come to you and knock on you. I was in New Hampshire with Joe Lieberman when he was running for president. And at the time, Joe was very unpopular because he supported the war. And he walked on up to someone's door, knocked on the door, and introduced himself. And the woman answered, and she said, "I know exactly who you are, and there's no way in hell you're ever going to get my vote." And
Slam.
No, she didn't slam the door on him. But she was very. People in New Hampshire they're amazing at how well they pay attention to the politics. But they talked for a while, and Joe tried to explain his position, etc. As he was leaving, he stopped, turned around, and said, "I bet we have more in common than you think we do. Maybe next time I come by, you'll let me talk to you about those things." And then he left. That is, I think, gets the public excited. And that's why I think you see so much excitement around Iowa and New Hampshire. Once you get past New Hampshire, it's all rallies at that point.
Okay.
And they're playing to the choir.
Can I add one quick thing? I think the two-party system has made for a lazy voter. And for that reason, you'll go up to the door. The first question out of their mouths are you a D or an R? And when I went around campaigning for the Green Party, I would say, well, I'm not affiliated with the D or with the Democrats or the Republicans. And immediately they took my signature board and wanted to sign. Didn't care what party I was. They were fascinated that somebody else was taking the chance to run. The D's and R's, we've already put them into their little boxes. And we've with the social media, I think you're right. I mean, people are reading what they want to read. They're not going to reach out across, but if you hear that third or fourth or fifth voice, you might want to, and you're hearing a little bits and pieces that fit into your ideas of what your candidate should be. It's going to open up more opportunities for the third and fourth parties.
Dick, I'm going to ask you this question. Melissa just said something very interesting about voting for somebody. I'm going to vote for a D or for an R because that's what my parents did and that's what I'm going to do. Are people voting for candidates these days and for ideals and for change and for progression, or are they voting against?
That's a good question. I think they're still voting for, but I think they have to be informed of what that person stands for, what that particular party stands for, so they can see if it aligns with their goals or not in that regard. But and I think there are people that vote against too. I think it's both ways. I'm going to be squarely on the fence on this one. I think it can go either way.
Can I add something? Yeah.
Yep.
The idea of voting for or against leads you to believe there's only two choices. And so if you had that third option, now you're not voting against something necessarily, you're voting for something absolutely. And I think that's a powerful change from the two-party system.
If we're changing away from a two-party system, and nobody says we are, so don't anybody get nervous, but if we do, and we do start opening ourselves up more to conversations with the third and fourth and fifth party candidates, what do those candidates need to do to legitimize themselves and get the same respect level that the Republicans and Democrats have? Is it going to be time? Is it going to be money? Is it going to be voters? Is it small towns, or is it state or national? Ray, we'll start with you.
Well, hopefully Melissa's not going to hit me on this one here. the first thing they have to do is get the chip off their shoulder. And no disrespect intended. The people who lead the third parties, the Green parties, the Libertarians, etc., they have a chip on their shoulder. They automatically assume, first and foremost with the media, you're never gonna give us a fair shake. And that's not, once you make assumptions, we all know the rest of how that phrase goes. So that's the first thing they have to do. And they have to realize, I think, that you don't have the avenues that the other guys have. So you need to take advantage of every avenue that you get to take advantage of. I've had candidates who don't want to come in and talk with me because they already know what I think and how I feel, et cetera. And that's a huge mistake on their part. As much as the Democrats and the Republicans tend to get very, snobby at times or egotistical, whatever the case may be, third-party candidates tend to get, treated, or they get to think of themselves as the underdog, and they take on this persona, which, quite frankly, isn't very warm and fuzzy, and it's hard to get your hands around them. Yes?
Yes, no, I agree with that. And I've seen the third-party system from the inside out, never having been part of a third party until I decided to run for the Senate. I always hated politics. But being there from the inside, you have to realize, and I took every day of my campaign as I'm going to win this. even though I knew at the end the chances are very slim, but I worked at it 10 times harder than the Democrat or Republican candidate. But as the third party, you have that defeatist mentality. You have to be able to put on a suit, go door to door, and do 100 times more work than that D and R are even thinking about doing. That's how you get buy-in from your people. Yeah.
What disadvantages did you experience because you weren't one of the major parties?
How much time do we have?
I didn't mean to open it.
Yeah, no. Actually, the biggest disadvantage was the Secretary of State's office and all the town clerk's offices. They didn't really know what to do with me. They never really had a candidate at that level go for public financing and to get on. I was on the ballot, luckily, but to really go for that public financing, which we might get into later, was probably the biggest challenge. And collecting the 4,000 signatures. Because
you were new, and it was a new idea. I guess.
Yeah, it's been around, I think, since 2006, 7. I'm not sure when the public financing started, but actually the Green Party sued for a better system in 2009. They've lost that. But the unfortunate part is, even though I collected half of the signatures required, only allowed me to get a third of the public financing, which doesn't make math sense. But who said politicians know how to add?
Yeah.
So.
Well, let me take that one step further, and she is the classic example because I saw her run for the Senate, and I'll put this into real numbers for you. Mm-hmm. If I was going to run for governor as an independent candidate, like Joe Visconti did, and so. You would have to go on out and collect your 7,000 signatures to get on the ballot. Now, 7,000 signatures, that's hard to do. Mm-hmm. But he managed to do it. Now, if he also wanted to go for public financing, first he would have had to raise $250,000 in small donations of $100 or less. And that's a task to do.
It's a lot of money.
That's what I would have had to do. That's what Foley would have had to do. That's what Malloy did. They all did that. And then the next step is, after I've collected my $250,000, I now have to go out for a second petition and get 264,000 signatures.
Yeah.
Just
Holy
to get
cow.
what they get with one signature. They do everything that I would do, and with one signature, they get $6 million. I need 264,000 signatures to get the same 6.
So you're exhausted by the time the first check comes out.
impossible.
The election's over.
Yeah.
Yeah, the election's over,
The election's
exactly.
yeah.
So is it history that gets them that perk, if you will? Is it experience? Is it their great knowledge and that they bestow upon us? How has it gotten to that point?
Well, it's interesting. Part of the Citizens Election Program, if you didn't get 20% of the vote in the year prior, in the election prior, if you were, say you're a Republican or a Democrat, and you did not receive 20% of the vote, you would actually have to do that same procedure and collect the signatures. But in order to get, I actually believe it should be changed so the Democrat, Republican, any party needs to collect a certain amount of signatures. Because what that does is it forces the candidate to go out there and talk to the people. Now you're just resting on your laurels as a D or an R. You don't have to necessarily do the work. Talking to those, and I had actually gotten about 6,000 signatures in order for the 4,000 to really count. Some people aren't registered, they didn't live in the district. But talking to those 6,000 people was, again, the best part of the campaign. And I received almost 10% of the vote as a first-time third-party candidate in my district, which is a pretty red district, was amazing. And I think that's because of the work that I had done. And I believe the Ds and Rs also need to do that work and maybe reduce the number of signatures, but then you'd have a fairer playing field.
Do you think that if the candidates spent more time talking to the citizens, knocking on doors, going to town halls, going to coffee shops, and less time talking at people on TV commercials, would we be better off? Dick?
I think so. It's a much more personal approach, and I think you would invest the people more in that kind of a situation, I think. Yeah, I think it would be a good one.
Okay. Melissa, any thoughts?
Yes, I think actually there should be a limit to every kind of part of the campaign. Each candidate is given, say, 5 minutes of commercial time. Each candidate is allowed to send out 2 brochures, and you really make it an even, even playing field. And you're not spending $1 million. And now, again, the Citizens Election Program is a great start, but I think it does need to be fixed a little bit. I don't think a Senate candidate for 100,000 people needs $100,000 to campaign. That's an inordinate amount of money. You take a little bit of that back, put it back into the pot. You reduce the amount, limit the number of flyers, and then that would open up some money for the third-party candidates too.
I don't think, I wouldn't go along with that.
What would you do differently?
Well, the first thing you have to do is if you want to get rid of the commercials, that's a problem for voters. Quite frankly, the bottom line is negative commercials win elections. So until voters,
Brutal.
well, as long as you keep voting for them, they're going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Why should I change the way I'm going to run my campaign if I keep getting elected?
If it works, yeah.
It works. Same thing. So when people say, I've had enough of this, and I'm not going to vote that particular office, that particular candidate, because I'm tired of it, then you'll see them change. I've often said that the day that 18 and 24-year-olds show up at the polls in force, in numbers, take everything you know about politics and just throw it out the window, it's a whole different ballgame. So the burden is not just on political parties or candidates. The burden is also on voters. I think you made a point that that voters tend to get lazy at times. We don't even think about politics until November. Most decisions are made in the last 2 weeks of October. Yet the process starts in May. As early as a year before, and so the burden. You can't just sit back and say it's their fault. You have to every now and then lift up the mirror and say, what am I doing to make it better? And I think that's an important part of it.
Let's talk just a little bit about those 18 to 24-year-olds, because they may not identify with the Republican Party that their parents were a member of, or the Democratic Party. Are they leaning more towards the third party, the Green candidates, the Libertarians, the Independents of the world? Are they leaning more towards those candidates? What should those candidates be doing to grab those young voters? And if they do grab them, is that going to change things? Dick,
I think they're much more interested in making up their own minds and not following a path laid out to them from their parents or something like that. And I think for that reason, they're interested in that third party that presents something different as a choice for them. The students that I talk with about this sort of thing, they say they don't want to vote based on labels. They want to make up their own mind on the individual merits of the particular candidates and decide things that way rather than going down the path that their parents took. They rebel against that path too, as well as other things. So
I think Dick is absolutely right, except for one point that my pride. They talk that game, but they don't act it.
Yeah,
I think prior to November, the Ron Pauls, the Rand Pauls, those candidates are going to attract the Green Party. They're going to attract younger people because Democrats and Republicans don't talk to young people. They talk about Social Security and retirements and et cetera. They're talking to me. They're not talking to young people. These other candidates do, but those candidates don't win primaries because then those 18 to 24 years, they're not voting. They like the candidate, but they don't vote. So now we're back to the Democrat and Republican talking about Social Security, and they don't care, and they don't show up in November either.
Yep.
It starts with the schools. In fact, the first selectman of Killingworth and myself are trying to get the students more actively involved civically in our towns. And the problem is there was almost zero connection civically between the school and our towns. In fact, the student council now, in the past, I don't know how it was for you guys, but you were voted in as president, vice president, treasurer. They don't even vote for offices anymore. Now their only function is to organize the dances and win one blood drive. The kids aren't learning how to vote, even how to register to vote. And you said the perfect thing where kids want to pick and choose. I mean, right now, kids are so different than they used to be. They have Netflix and Hulu. They don't want cable. Because they want to pick and choose exactly what they want to watch. And I think eventually it'll come around, and those people will realize, wow, these old people are making my future, and I need to vote. It's really sad, though, that the education system isn't promoting civic duties and responsibilities, and just teaching kids about civics.
Yep, along with Dick said, I just read an interesting column where Kathleen Parker from the Washington Post was making the argument that millenniums put Barack Obama in office, in the White House. They elected the first black president. They now expect to elect the first woman president. Therefore, millenniums are considered to be in Hillary's corner already. And it's going to be interesting to watch how this folds out, whether they stay there or whether they eventually shift and go someplace else. But there's an expectation on the part of younger people that again, breaking that
they're blazing the new trail.
Blazing their own trail, yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, and just based on the two candidates that you just mentioned, they're both from the Democratic Party. Are the young people trending more towards that party, and what do we do, if anything, to get them away from thinking about a D label and more diverse other candidates?
Well, Republicans have to be a little bit more open if they hope to get those. And the same with Greens and Libertarians and other party candidates. You have to work for it. I mean, you know, it looks as if it's easy. It looks as if, okay, young people are flocking towards the Democrats. But it's not that easy. They're talking about issues that are important. They talk about social issues. You know, Republicans talk about war. Who wants to go to war? Right? I mean, Republicans have a reputation, they're anti-women. Who wants to be on that side? Republicans hate immigration. Who wants to be on that side? And you know, Green Party, you know, with all due respect again, you know, they don't like the military. You know, Scott Deschaphy, when he was running for Congress, wanted to close the Groton sub base. He had a big chance of winning for Congress in the 2nd District, didn't he? You know, so, I mean, you got to know, I mean, it gets back to that, you know, basically it's all about advertising, marketing, and Mad Men. Know your audience and play to your, you don't have to sell your soul to play to your audience. You just need to understand who your audience is and then play to them, play to your strengths in that regard.
I think you're right about the leaning naturally more toward the Democrats than the Republicans, the younger people are. Well, our whole state, I mean, we have 5 representatives, they're all Democrats. We have 2 senators, they're both Democrats. Governor's Democrat. Do we really have a 2-party system in this state?
Well, you know what's ironic? You know, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
101 of 169 municipal leaders are Republicans.
Yeah.
But yet we
Oh,
can't.
really?
We cannot elect a majority Republican in the General Assembly or to Washington or the governor's mansion. Yet 101 of the local cities and towns
That's interesting.
are led by
I didn't
Republicans.
know that it was
So
that.
let me ask you this, and I'm going to point this directly in your direction, Melissa. Speaking of the small towns, I go down to my town hall every other Tuesday night. I'm on this committee or that. We don't identify by party in my town. Now, granted, it's the town of Franklin. There's a whole, 1,200 people or so. But when we're sitting down at that table, we're talking about the citizens and the town of Franklin. We're talking about educating the children, making sure the trash gets picked up. We're talking about making sure the roads get plowed. What else is there to talk about in Franklin? We don't attach a label to it. So I don't even know on some of the panels and boards that I'm on who's who, because it doesn't matter, because we're all just talking genuinely about what's going on in our town. So where do we lose that? Where do we lose that disconnect? Or is it? I don't know. Is it a problem?
Well, I think politics is still a popularity contest. I mean, you look at Barack Obama, he was a young, African-American, different, and that's how he won. Locally, it isn't about politics. It's about fiscal responsibility, and I don't mean conservatism or being conservative. It's doing the right thing, making sure the books are balanced, making sure that the citizens are listened to. When you put that, and you brought up a good point, 101 out of 169, it is more local level Republican. But then when you get up more to the representatives, senators, even national leaders, it is, I think, trending more blue or liberal. It now becomes more about the issues, a little bit less than personality. Locally, your first selectman or mayor. But I think for senators, it becomes about more of the 2 parties. And that's why it's hard for the third party to break in there, because it's so inundated with the voices of those 2 big ones.
Dick will appreciate this analogy if I can. Then I'll let him jump on it. I always described it as baseball. When you're talking local politics, you're the minor league baseball team on the school bus. Then you move up to to the next level, and now you got the charter bus. Then you make it to the majors, and you have the charter airplane. and that's where the change starts to affect. On the school bus, you don't care where you sit. On the charter bus, you want to have a comfy seat. When you're on the airplane, you want to fly, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So regarding the differences between our local towns and cities, where I believe that people can make a difference, that's why I volunteer and go down there every other Tuesday night. Where do we lose the people in all this? Where are the voters? Where are the citizens of America in these elections?
I think one place we lose the people, at least at the national level, is they see all the animosity in Washington and the failure to negotiate, the failure to compromise, and it's all or nothing there. Whereas locally, I think you see a lot more compromise and a lot more negotiation, the way it should be. And so I think that's one thing where they would lean toward the more local level.
Let me ask you this. We talk about the right side of the aisle, the left side of the aisle. Why do we have an aisle? Why don't we just all sit together and you guys are the guys from North Dakota and you guys are the girls from, New Mexico? Why don't we just sit alphabetically or, by height or by anything else but a dividing line?
I guess they tried that at the State of the Union address a couple years ago. We were supposed to invite somebody from the other party to go with you and mix it all together. Yeah. If we didn't have that aisle with a definite definition between them.
There's an aisle. It's a pathway, if you will. Is it a pathway or is it a barrier?
Yeah, it becomes a barrier. You're right.
Melissa, any thoughts on that?
Well, it's become that pathway, again, because of the lazy. It's easier. I don't want to say lazy as a negative word. It's just easier to say, okay, D or R. Nobody buys, if you go to buy a new car today, you won't only have a choice between a blue and a red car. We want choices. The problem with the third parties, fourth parties, fifth parties, they tend to want to jump into the race at the national level. You have to build a party from the ground up. And I've brought this up to my Green friends. You can't, they were taking petitions out for Jill Stein for president, totally neglecting local races. And you don't build a house with the roof first, you start with the foundation. And that's what we need to do, and that's what will kind of help mingle people in the aisle, as you say.
So let me ask you this. In a small town, or even a city like Bridgeport, if we do have a third or fourth party candidate, a Libertarian, a Green Party, how do they even get started in the local politics? And you're absolutely right. You know what, putting my name up for president probably isn't going to go anywhere. I might get 4 or 5 votes here. But how does one get started to actually be a viable candidate without that D or R behind their name? Ray, you know local politics.
Jody Rell started on the Board of Education. You started on the Planning and Zoning Board. That's how you start. Now, whether you're a Green or a Libertarian or whatever the case may be, you get yourself involved. And it doesn't have to be to an elected position like Board of Education or Planning and Zoning. It could be a church group. Could be a PTA group. It could be any organization in town. There you start your base. Where you have people that you're talking to, you find people who agree with you on certain issues, and all of a sudden a movement starts. It's the great Arlo Guthrie's Alice's Restaurant. They have 2 people do it, they're going to think something's up, but if 3 people do it, it's a movement. And that's really how it all starts. You do have to, and again, Melissa will attest to this, and pats on the back all the way around. You have to work for it. And it does come easy if you're the D or the R, because you're automatic. Once you get that town committee endorsement, you're already on the ballot. Everybody else has to fight for it. But it was my dear hero Hunter Thompson who said anything that's worth doing is worth doing right. So if you want to do this, if you really think that you can make a difference, then you have to get out there and you have to fight for it, you have to work for it and do it every day. But the opportunities are there. Republicans drive me nuts in Connecticut when they say you can't win in Connecticut because it's a blue state. And I always bring back the number of 101. How did that happen if you can't win in Connecticut? How did a Republican governor run the state for 16 years? How come it's been 30 some odd years since the last Democrat sat in the governor's office? Excuses are easy. It's the people who want to work that are going to win.
Melissa, let me ask you this. You ran as a Green Party candidate, but yet you've been elected as a Democrat. How does that make you feel?
A little bit dirty. It was tough. I was going to run as a third party candidate for first selectman. The Democrats did not have anybody, and they approached me and asked if I would run. Obviously, I was registered as a Green. They refused to put me on their ticket as a Green. I compromised and I switched to U. So I actually won as an unaffiliated. And again, it's labels that they don't make any sense to me. And this goes back to the first question you asked, do parties matter? I really think that the platform of the person is important. And if Republicans want to win in the state of Connecticut, they should give the people what they're asking for. If you stick with that platform the whole way through, it's not going to work. And obviously then the people of Connecticut don't want you. But it was hard to run on the D line, especially when there was such animosity from the Senate race. I was the spoiler, and that was hard to overcome because that's a really, really dirty word in my mind.
Dick, what do you see about that?
No, I think I back up everything she said there. That's and she knows from experience much better than I, reading it in textbooks and that sort of thing. One of the things that I've really noticed from watching New London politics is that you were talking about the differences between the parties and so on. I don't think that matters much at the local level. I think Mayor Finizio's biggest battles have been with other Democrats on the city council. I don't see him battling. I'm drawing a blank on the name of the.
Is that Pissarro or?
Well, there's one Republican member of the council.
Okay.
I should remember because he came and spoke to my classes. So I'll think of it in a minute. But I see less battle between Darrell and him than I do between Darrell and all the Democrats on the, and Pissarro is going to be running against him. So that heightens it a little bit more. It's a little hard to figure out exactly what the role is of the parties locally compared to what they are nationally.
If they're in the same party, aren't they all on the same team? Why would they have argument? Everybody's shaking their heads. Hold on.
Yeah.
Why? Okay, so why can't they all just get along? You know, shouldn't all the Democrats be marching to the same tune? Shouldn't all the Republicans be carrying the same
Should
torches?
perhaps, but
Should. Okay, shoulda, coulda, woulda.
I don't think they do.
It'd be awful. One, it'd be boring, and two, the reason they don't do it is because of ego. Plain and simple as that. I mean, politics is an ego business, whether you want to admit it or not. You need to have an ego to go bang on that stranger's door and interrupt their dinner with a phone call or whatever the case may be. And that ego's not a bad thing. Again, it's called working for it in that regard.
The problem is you've made two groups of the entire nation. You're going to have butting heads. If you had, say, 6 or 7 parties in there, it might be a different story. You're still going to have people butting heads. But within those two parties, you have major factions. Obviously, you have the Tea Party came out of the Republican, which isn't a real party. So you're splitting the whole demographic of voters into two groups. It's impossible to not have that head butting.
And it has become us versus them.
Mm-hmm.
It really has. You just said something interesting. You talked a little bit about the Tea Party, and you said not a real party. So let me ask you this. Why are the third parties the Rodney Dangerfield of politics? They just get no respect. What do they need to do to become legitimate, to become financed, to become recognized and viable?
The Tea Party, the Quiet Corner Patriots from up north, Windham County, a year or so ago, they invited me up to speak to them. In the topic that they wanted me to speak on, how do I get elected in a blue state? So how does a Tea Party conservative candidate get elected in the blue state? And the favorite example that I give all groups who ask me that question is there's basically 3 groups of voters that you're dealing with. One group is the group that agrees with you 100%, and no matter what you do, they're going to vote for you. They just agree, they like what you think and your position and everything. There's the other group that disagrees with everything you stand for, and under no circumstances whatsoever will they ever vote for you. Then there's that third group who haven't made up their mind. They want to know who you are and what you're all about. Now, who's the most important group you want to spend your time with?
The people that haven't decided yet?
No. You want to spend your time with the
I've been doing it wrong this whole time?
You haven't. The people you want to spend your time with are the people who will never vote for you. If you don't know why they will never vote for you, you'll never have the conversation with the people who want to know who you are. You have to understand that not everyone agrees with you. And that's the problem I think Democrats and Republicans do. They get this mindset that I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, therefore you're naturally going to understand what I'm all about. But the people, that third group of people, they don't know what you're all about, and they want to know. So and again, if you only talk to them the party line, you're going to lose some of them. You're not going to get them. But if you can stand in front of a group and say, look, I know that people don't agree with me on X, Y, E issue. And I know why they don't disagree, because they think X, Y, Z. But here's why I think A, B, C is better. Now you're having a conversation. Now all of a sudden, you've just presented to them a candidate who actually listens to what other people say. And in that sense that I believe is an important key.
Okay. Melissa, I see you shaking your head. You're agreeing.
Yes, I'm totally agreeing, actually, because when I ran both for the Green Party and locally, the rule is in campaigning, well, just don't go to the doors that are the opposite party. I made sure I went to every door. I went to the R's, I went to the D's, the U's. Most of the people registered today are U's anyway. In our town and most of Connecticut, you have the U's actually are the same number of D's and R's combined, pretty much. For my Senate run, as the Green Party, it was very refreshing to be able to not have the stigma of being a D or an R. It opened up a whole new world for people, and in discussions with them, it made them think, well, maybe she's not too far away from what I was thinking. Never ignore somebody you think is not going to vote for you. It was very powerful. But that's the mentality of campaigning is, oh, don't go to the people who aren't going to vote for you. Doesn't make sense.
That's really interesting that you said that, because one of the first years that I was running for election, my name was on the ballot and my parents were so proud. But we're sitting at our party headquarters, which is somebody's kitchen table, making phone calls off the voter list of people who have already voted. And sure enough, they said, oh, only call these people. And I won't say which, what color we were. Only call these people. Well, hang on. Why not call all these other people that are on my street, that know me, that see me taking my dog out for a walk, that see me picking up my paper, that see me going back and forth to work every day? Why wouldn't I call them? Dick, do you have any experience with that?
Well, no, I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier, more about the campaigning, I guess. You said, should people engage in what you would call retail campaigning or speak to big groups and so on and so forth? And I think we're going to get a test of that with Hillary. That's what she's announced for her strategy right now, I think, is to speak one-to-one with people and talk with them individually rather than speaking to big groups. So maybe we'll get a test of that and see what works out for her.
I think that will change right after New Hampshire.
That may be.
I think so.
Yeah.
So you said something really interesting, Ray, about, we see the people we've seen on television. We see them, the governor of Connecticut, the president, your senator, and you see them in person, and they're not larger than life.
No.
They're people just
people,
like
yeah.
us.
Sure.
You're the first selectman. When I first met I still call him Mr. Matters. And he keeps saying, you can call me Rich. And I don't know, I just think that I should be more respectful of him. But you know what? He's a Franklin farmer just like the rest of us. How do your constituents react to you when they see you at the grocery store?
It's kind of off-putting because they do put you on this strange pedestal, and I'm one of those people that if I met a famous person today, I would not put them on a pedestal, so I look at things a little differently. I ask them to call me Melissa, the same thing. When you get up into the State House and people do look at their legislators like they walk on water, and I think that's a problem. It's this, it's a boys' club, and most people aren't invited into that. So they make that for themselves. Unfortunately, a lot of politicians, and I still say the word politician is a dirty word these days, they love that. A lot of the guys, they love that feeling, so they promote that. And until they bring themselves down, obviously Hillary can't go speak to every citizen in the United States, but they need to bring themselves down to the level of the people, and this goes back, I think, to making them maybe collect some petition signatures.
Is there one party that does that better or worse than the other? Putting you on the spot.
No, actually, I would say the Democrats actually do that worse than the Republicans.
Really?
Yes, and it's interesting, counterintuitive, but maybe because they already have a handle on, or they control the House and the Senate. Maybe that's why. It just seems like they're more aloof than the Republicans, and I'm probably murdering my political career by saying that. So, but that's just what I've seen, and obviously, it's not a blanket statement. There are some really great legislators up there that really work hard.
I think they're all good. And I've been on the campaign trail with them. And what I tell people is, they're all sincere people. They're our neighbors. They live next door. They go to the same supermarket and the trash, dump as the rest of us do. They really, truly want to do something that's going to make their town, their state, a better place to live, work, and raise a family. And they're out there. You don't do what they do day in and day out, night after night, unless you care about something. Now, what they care about is fair game. But I don't think they are bad people in themselves. And I think we talked about respect. I think we do need to show a little bit more respect for people that actually have the audacity to put themselves out there and run for elected office. And like we were talking earlier, the worst job interview you'll ever have in your entire life, especially when your friends say, no, we'll take the other guy.
Oh dear.
But the problem is, it's the I would say the horse trading behind the scenes. I've seen the really negative side of politics with the Haddam land swap. And so it becomes, because of the two parties, you're not answering to the people anymore, you're answering to your caucus. And that, I think, has become a major problem. And
Let's talk about another problem, just as we're starting to wrap up. The money. And you mentioned a problem, and show me the money. Where does the money come into effect with our parties? And we talk about the private donations. You need those, those little tiny bits to all add up. You've got the little tiny donations, you've got the private money, and then the super secret money. So how does that affect our political parties? And Dick, I'll start with you.
No, I just think it's out of control, the whole money thing. And that's from the federal on down. Yeah. And the Supreme Court hasn't been any help in that regard, opening the door to every corporate contribution that they want to make in any amount. I think it's going to continue to be a greater problem over time.
Why would somebody, I'm not a business, I am a business major, absolutely. Why would somebody spend $40 million of their own money to get a job that pays $100,000? Right then and there, I'm not going to vote for the person because they don't know how to balance a budget.
Doesn't look too good that way, no.
Why? Why? Other than ego, and Ray mentioned that earlier.
Prestige or ego.
What other logic is there?
They can.
Because they can?
Yeah.
It's power. It all comes down to power. That's at the national level. I think locally, Connecticut actually has a nice, clean elections program. Again, I think it's unfair to any other of the two major parties. I don't think you need $100,000 though to run a campaign locally. I think it could be a lot less, and some of the extra money could be used for opening it up. On the national level, it is ridiculous with Citizens United, and that really poses a problem. And until you fix it at the national level, you're going to have a lot of states that are afraid to go to a citizens election type program.
Is it time to try something different? And what might that different look like in 2015 and beyond?
Fairness. We were talking about the finances here. In 2007, Connecticut adopted the public financing program, which was a model for the state with only two minor flaws in it. One was the way it treated third-party candidates with that extra petitioning. The second flaw, which I've been battling since 2007, there's a provision of the law right now, still on the books, that allows an incumbent running for re-election without an opponent to qualify for public money to run an election they can't lose.
Yeah.
Can we time out for a second?
Sure.
When you say public money, whose money is that?
It's the leftover money that's in bank accounts that never get collected. It's from the sale of property that the state has. It's not a budget item, so it's not that kind of taxpayers' money. But it is money that belongs to the taxpayers, that the state. It's those 5-cent cans that you never return. It's that kind of money there that goes into this fund. But imagine an incumbent Republican or Democrat can go and apply for public money to run a campaign they can't lose because they don't have an opponent. Those are the two flaws.
Wow.
Citizens United was probably the worst decision has ever been made. But the knee-jerk reaction here in Connecticut as a result of that has taken this fine model and absolutely destroyed it. It is embarrassing what they've done to this program right now. In the latest fix that just came out of the GAE committee this year here, Ted Kennedy Jr., nice guy, I've met him once, he convinced his friends and family to donate $40,000 to the Democratic State Committee. The Democratic State Committee then contributed $40,000 to his campaign. It doesn't go reported.
Wow.
Because it went through the back door.
That's that secret money.
That's the secret money. Ted Kennedy got $216,000 from the state Democratic Party, in addition to the public financing. So what was the fix that they adopted this year? You can't do it we're going to cap it at $250,000.
How is that helping?
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
It's a joke. And the problem, I think, is the Democrats and Republicans in Hartford right now are so afraid of having a super PAC come on in and attack them that they go to these extremes to do this, and they don't realize what it looks like to the general public. If you were going to run for re-election and you didn't have an opponent and you applied for public money, how do you go to the grocery store and talk to your neighbors and say, I'm doing it? They don't get that part, and that's a breakdown that needs to be addressed.
But they also could opt out of the system too.
They can.
If they were fiscally responsible. Again, if you asked a good question, how can we change this? Is it time for a change? And it's a whole other show in itself. But excuse me, ranked choice voting is where you have your first, second, and third choice. I really think they would clean up a lot of the two-party stranglehold on politics.
Dick, would that work?
I really hadn't thought that through before. Caught me cold. It's a good idea, I think. It would really change the nature of the campaigns and the actual voting.
Well, at that
act.
point, is it a popularity contest? Is that really what we're dealing with in the first place? Is it a popularity contest at that point if we're starting to rank our candidates?
We already ranked them. You just have one or nothing. This way, it gets rid of that fear. Everybody says, oh, don't vote for the third party, it's a spoiled vote. There is no vote that's a spoiled vote unless it's a vote not cast or a vote cast for somebody that you don't fully believe in. And when you have that ranked choice, it gives people even though they shouldn't need it, but it gives them the courage to be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to put this one first, but if they don't win, I'll be okay with this one. I think it would help.
The problem with that is that it also lends itself to the possibility of runoff elections. And it's hard enough to get people to come out and vote in one election right now. How are you going to get them to come back and vote again for the same people again? I think the system that we have, I don't think the system is broke. I think the way we use the system needs some reform and some refinement. And that just takes the political courage for people to stand up and say, this is what's right. And it's about time we did what's right, not what's popular or favorable to any one group or person.
And is that the third-party candidates these days, or is it still the Republicans and Democrats?
To me, it's the candidate. I don't care what party they are. You get the right candidate who knows how to connect with people and actually has some ideas that can work their way into solutions. Republicans and Democrats don't have exclusive right to the right ideas. You need a conversation. If you get the right candidate who's willing to talk, who understands what the issue is, and willing to put in the time and the effort, the whole complexion of it doesn't matter whether it's RD, whatever the case may be. There's the connection, and the connection has been lost. Like I said, Hillary's going to go retail, no question about it, for the first two, Iowa and New Hampshire. Come South Carolina, you're going to see her in front of it doesn't
Back in
work.
front of the big crowd.
Back in front of the
big crowd. You
teleprompter
got
and
it.
big crowds.
Yep.
And so let me ask, this is something that I heard a long time ago. Party A, and I won't put a label on it, is the party of bad ideas. Party B is the party of no ideas. Are these third parties, are they coming in with different ideas, or are they just rehashing the same things that the first two guys already said? Dick,
No, I think they're coming in with some new ideas.
what do they need to do to get people to listen to those ideas?
I think just talk to the people and explain what they're doing, and I think people are looking for good ideas and looking for convincing good ideas. But it is a problem getting the word out there to them and convincing them. But
Is the problem they don't have access, they don't have the money, they don't have the voters, the respect, the
I
name
think
recognition?
it's the respect thing. I think they get less attention. I'm sure that Melissa would know more about that than I would. But yeah, they have to find a way to get that message out there and track the message to people.
Do you think that, and because you work with young people all day long at the school, do you think that social media is going to drive change towards the third parties? Or what do you think, if anything, any effect it'll have on it?
Yeah, I think it'll affect a movement towards the third parties. I think it certainly has that potential.
So it's a little broader.
Their world is so wrapped up with it, the social media. That
Okay, so whoever comes out with the most clever tweet gets
could
the
be,
vote?
Could be,
Is that how it goes?
could be, yeah.
I need to work on my tweeting.
Well, I think the third party allows the ideas to come out even more, whereas it seems to me that the two major parties are always saying, well, he said, she said, or he did this or didn't do this, instead of about their own ideas. I don't even know what the Democrat or Republican platforms are anymore. Whereas you have the New Justice Party, they have 3 specific issues. The Green Party has their 10 points in their platform. It allows them to be specific about their message, whereas the Ds and Rs, it's kind of just this blanket statement, blanket idea.
More of an umbrella.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's just wrap up. We've got about 2 or 3 minutes left. Ray, what do you think we ought to do? Stay the course, make big changes?
Well, those are the only two choices.
I know.
You either stay the course or it's time for change. We need to go back to Ronald Reagan, and I'll make this very, very brief if I can. Ronald Reagan is seen as the icon of the conservative movement. The truth of the matter is, when he came up with this 11th commandment of thou shalt not speak badly of another Republican, what he was saying to his fellow Republicans is, the public has problems. Jobs, education, salaries, housing, whatever the case. They don't want to listen to bickering, so stop it. And then he purposely went out and tried to woo independents because he knew the independents were growing because they were getting tired of party politics. So it's not about conservative, it's about practicality. And I think that, you know, whether it be a third-party candidate or a major party candidate, be practical, know your audience, and just talk to them. That's all it takes, and you can win an election.
He makes it sound so easy. Melissa, how is it really on the street?
Of course it's easy, yeah. Three different things I think that we need to do. Need to start in the school. We need to get the kids to understand civic involvement. Their duty to vote sounds really boring, but have them go to Board of Selectmen meetings or get involved, join a board. Second thing, you need to fair up the citizens election program to allow more of the third and fourth candidates to come in. And then the last thing is instant runoff voting. There is a system now set up where you can actually do it all in one election and be done with it, and you still have your top three choices. And I think those are the three things we need to do.
Dick, what do you think, just in closing?
Well, I think the parties need to be more involved with supporting the candidates, educating the candidates, getting them ready to run their elections, and focusing on that sort of thing. The parties have changed so much over the years in their functions. And now I think that their important function is, first of all, to help choose good people to run for office, but then to support them 100%. And there are many organizations now that put on courses at the national level at least, for newly elected people on how to run their elections initially and then how to settle into the job. I think there's still a big role for the parties in boosting the people who are elected to office and educating the citizens as to what they believe and how they're going to serve their needs.
Well, they definitely have their work cut out for them, it
Yeah, that's
sounds
for
like,
sure.
that's for sure. All right, so just in closing, I'd like to thank our three guests from this evening. We have on my far side, Dr. Richard Cole, again, political science professor at the University of Connecticut. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Sure.
Melissa Schlag, the first selectman of Haddam. Thanks for coming all the way out to Eastern Connecticut today. We appreciate you being here. And Ray Hackett, editorial page editor of the Bulletin. All the best in your retirement, sir.
Thank you.
Good luck. All right, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Gaston Daume, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters. There are several reasons why I belong to this organization. First, I strongly believe that one of the most important functions of a citizen is to vote. This organization makes a big effort registering voters. Second, I also believe that an informed electorate is very important, and the League of Women Voters brings speakers to inform voters on important issues that are being considered for a vote. Third, this organization is a non-partisan advocacy group lobbying legislators on pertinent issues of concern to the community. Finally, I enjoy the company of women. My lawyer is a woman, my doctor is a woman, my financial advisor is a woman, and my best friend, who sometimes plays the role of my wife, is also a woman. I would like to encourage other men to join this worthwhile civic organization.